Flipping to new topic, thinking about cryptocurrency, and I love your kind of thoughts on the administration's embrace of cryptocurrency, particularly the Trump family's embrace of it. And I do recall maybe a year or two ago, did you not do some kind of Barron Trump kind of crypto
Yeah,
project?
yeah. Barron and I tried to do something, and I think that family is pretty complicated. um, uh, I get some inside views on just how you know difficult it is to be a Trump. Um, I think that there's a lot of competition in that family. It's always tough as well when there's kids from different marriages. And Barron is a very young man compared to some of his brothers, and so. I think the interest in crypto in a lot of ways is a get rich quick thing. I think that there's no other way to put it. Now, I bet you the Trump brothers would say otherwise. But at the end of the day, it is a bit of some people would use a bad word. I'm not going to use a bad word. It is an opportunistic thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, by the way. So that's the key difference is that people like Elizabeth Warren will say, oh, well, look at this. This guy's thieving from the people. Well, I'd rather you steal from my face than from behind my back. And I think that it's not stealing, of course, but the point is, how did Elizabeth Warren get $250 million? I mean, that is a bigger question. At least Trump's a businessman. He's not saying he's not a businessman. He's not saying he's not an opportunist. And I expect capitalists in America to do what they do, which is make money, and that's fine. But it's when people like Elizabeth Warren or AOC or whoever, they start shoving millions of dollars in their pocket while also saying out of the other side of their mouth that they're not doing that. They represent the average person. Well, look at Bernie Sanders with his, it does it as well. And I feel like that hypocrisy, I don't. So I guess in short, I don't love the stuff that the Trump family is necessarily doing in crypto, but I can't blame them and I can't call them hypocrites. And we all want to make money, including the president. Why shouldn't he make money? I do think it's disingenuous when these presidential libraries get stoked with hundreds of millions of dollars and they're virtually bribes. Hillary Clinton, of course, is my number one target on this kind of subject. So, at the end of the day, let him make his money. He's made a fortune in crypto. Crypto's a weird space. It's kind of a big Ponzi scheme in a lot of ways. There is some future there. There's some opportunity there. It's exciting and interesting, but it has a lot of weird game theory with, if we replace the dollar with this other kind of money, then, well, what happens to the dollar? What happens to America? And I had these discussions with that family, and it's a very interesting, state of affairs. But regardless of whether crypto is something that's technologically useful in a free society, one of the things that I'd like you to chew on for a second is crypto was born in 2008 out of the crisis of bailouts, the crisis of banks failing. And the person or people that made it said, we're sick of this. In fact, it's so clear that on the original block of the blockchain is a newspaper photograph of a bailout of a major bank. And it was sort of a symbol of, this has to stop. We can't let AOC print money for the rest of eternity because they feel like it. And it's not like Trump's reducing the deficit, by the way, either. So I'm going to make this crypto. And one of the other reasons crypto was made was AML. I don't want JP Morgan to control my life. I want to take my life into my own hands. Why should I let a bank, cancel me because of something I tweeted? A bank can say, no, we don't want your money. And so you can get debanked, and that's happened many times, including to me. So I think that when it comes to crypto, the reasoning is all there. But what I want you to chew on is, if the government goes in the other direction and now frees up things like censorship in banks and lowers the deficit, et cetera, the need for crypto is marginally less there. You're a business person, the idea of a marginal utility, it sort of is a little less important to have a censorship-free currency because, well, the government's not censoring you anymore. But if we get to a Madmani as president, well, that's when you need Bitcoin really bad because, the dollar's tainted by a government that wants to just water it down, dilute the hell out of it, inflate the hell out of it, and spend the hell out of it on entitlements that, quite frankly, we can't afford. So I think the case for Bitcoin is dropping a little bit because we're having this homeostasis where politics are getting back to normal. And business is getting back to normal, and at least they're talking about cutting the deficit. Maybe they're not doing it yet.
Well, I think that all these different use cases for crypto in terms of like tethered, cross border, settlement
Sure.
type products, and those are really helpful. Those are
Absolutely.
things that we need. But then you have the meme coins, which is what I think of as like basically unregulated individual lotteries.
Yes.
So I can set up a lottery this morning, and normally I couldn't do a lottery; it's illegal in every single state. But since we call it a meme coin, I'm allowed to do it, and which I
Right.
think is fascinating, and eventually it won't be legal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
They're gonna regulate it away. Yeah.
poor countries love the lottery. Haiti, a third of their economy is lottery. Albania, where I'm from, almost had a complete total economic collapse due to a chain letter scam. So, our stock market right now resembles a lottery. And,
If you're if you're buying a meme coin right now, the other guy on the other side of the transaction, 1 out of 3 times lives in Nigeria.
right.
I mean, that's who your the other side
Yeah.
is of the
Yeah, we're,
transaction.
we're in a bit of a bubble. I mean, uh, on Robinhood, you can gamble on sports. It doesn't. Could you imagine going to your
No.
broker at Citigroup and saying, "Yeah, let's buy 1,000 shares of Microsoft and put $200 in the Jets this week."
Why not? That seems completely reasonable.
Yeah, I mean the
Well,
gamble culture. I think Anthony Pomp has talked about this, that the amount of gambling in America is at an all-time high, and it's almost an addiction, especially with younger people. Most people don't get to spend a lot of time around younger people, but I run a software company, and we get a lot of guys who are 19, 20 joining the company, and gambling is just a pure addiction in that age market. It's really sad how companies like Stake, which has Drake as its ambassador,
yeah.
they're basically poisoning these kids with this idea that they should be gambling all day. It's really terrible.
Yeah, one of my son's roommates, basically very smart guy, PhD level guy, but he basically is just all he does is gamble all day long, and that's kind of his thing. And he's basically like, well, I just don't even think I'm going to go get a job. I'm just going to stay gambling, and he makes enough money to do that to live a great lifestyle. And so many kids are being taught this. I wonder. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if you're a probability PhD and you're working everything out and doing it carefully, but it's another
They're all
thing.
math. They're all math guys, so they're pretty
Yeah, I
smart.
think those
So
guys, they do what they do, but the guy that's taking $5,000 and buying, a wheat stock or a quantum computing stock or some other like kind of.
oh, you're big time short quantum computing,
I
right?
am, I am, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
this feverish. I don't want to pick quantum too much, but the EVTOL companies, the nuclear companies, there's a lot of bubble out there. AI even starting to get there. Are we gambling in the stock market as much as we're gambling in sports, and then we're gambling in meme coins? What are we not gambling?
Right. Well, hey, switching topics. Hey, if you've got a question for Martin, put your hand up.
Tom
Oh,
is
hey, Tom.
yeah.
Tom, why don't you